Hello and welcome. Before I am going to start today's video, I want you to see this glimpse of my previous video from AWS VPC. Right now we are not going to perform any practical for endpoints. It is very easy practical. I can perform this within 5 to 10 minutes. But the problem is, if I will perform this right now, okay, you may have lots of confusion at what I am doing. In upcoming days, when we will learn about DynamoDB or S3, at that time, I will tell you that now we have knowledge about S3, DynamoDB. So now we will perform practical of endpoint or VPC endpoint. You don't need to worry about this. Even you do not need to make any reminder. I have this inbuilt reminder in my mind. And at that time, I will show you this video that I promise you that we are going to talk about practical of VPC endpoint. And right now we are doing this. So you don't need to worry. You just enjoy our series. As I promised you in this video, that definitely we will talk about VPC endpoint practically. Here in this video, we are going to perform lab for VPC endpoint for S3. Here we are going to understand VPC endpoint for S3 and then we are going to perform lab for this. We are going to complete all this process within 3 chapters. Chapter number 1, Introduction of VPC endpoint for S3. Chapter number 2, VPC endpoint terminologies. And final chapter, chapter number 3, create a gateway endpoint for S3. So let's start with the chapter number 1, Introduction. Here I have 3 points to explain you what is use case of VPC endpoint for S3. Point number 1, you need to understand default access. Let's say that if I have one EC2 instance running inside my VPC. Now from this particular EC2 instance, I want to access this S3 bucket. How this communication will work? Let me tell you, by default, when you are going to access S3 bucket from your EC2 instance, the data will travel through the internet. Yes, even though both of your resources are inside same region. No matter, but the main understanding that we need over here is that communication between your EC2 to S3 bucket will be happening through the internet. And this is default behavior of AWS. Without VPC endpoint, means the default scenario, accessing S3 from EC2 instance involves public internet. But if you are going to use VPC endpoint, with VPC endpoint, the connection to S3 stays within AWS, avoiding the public internet. So, if you are going to create VPC endpoint, you have the first and biggest advantage is if you want to copy your data or if you want to transfer your data from AWS EC2 to S3 or S3 to AWS EC2, you do not need to use internet. Data will travel through the Amazon network or AWS network itself. So, there are many benefits. The benefits are increasing security. Your data is not traveling through insecure internet. You have reduced latency as well because here AWS will use its own network which is having low latency access, and because of this you will get better performance. So, creating VPC endpoint to access S3 bucket from your VPC is always having biggest advantages. I hope you understand the use case and introduction of AWS VPC endpoint for S3. Now, we are going to start chapter number 2, VPC endpoint terminologies. I don't want you to go to the old video of VPC, watch out this and then come back. You don't need to worry about this. I'm going to provide you brief introduction of VPC endpoint right now, and then we will go for the lab as well. So, here I have VPC endpoint terminologies. When setting up the VPC endpoint, you will come across 2 options. Right now, I have this Amazon EC2 instance and I want this EC2 EC2 instance to access my S3 bucket, but I don't want to use internet. I want to use Amazon private network. Now in this case, I have to go to the VPC. So here I am going to the VPC, and then inside VPC console, you will get this endpoints option. Now here when you click on create endpoint, you will get many options, but the first option we have is about AWS services. Now here, if you look at this list, you will get two types of endpoint. Here we have VPC endpoint interface, and another one we have is actually gateway endpoint. So in AWS, we have two types of endpoint, VPC endpoint. One, we call it gateway endpoint, and the another one we have is interface endpoint. If you look at over here, you will find out both. It is gateway and interface. Now we need to understand that when we are going to create gateway endpoint and when we are going to create interface endpoint, right? So here I have a clear understanding about when we are going to create which one. So first of all, we have gateway endpoint use case best for services like S3 and DynamoDB. If you want to access DynamoDB or S3 from your EC2 instance, it is always recommended to go with the gateway endpoint. One of the reasons to use gateway endpoint is there is no additional charges for using gateway endpoint. Biggest advantage, right? Setup. When we are going to set up gateway endpoint, it is easier to set up as integrates directly to your VPC route table. So when we are going to set up this gateway endpoint, we have to add entry into the route table. But you don't need to worry about this. You just need to specify your route table and it will add this entry automatically. I want you to see this. Let's say that if I am going to the VPC and if I am going to create endpoint and if I am going to choose S3 gateway endpoint. So if I am going to choose this, look at this here. I have to choose my VPC and you will get detail about your route table, and you have to select this route table because it will add entry into the route table automatically. Gateway endpoint requires to add entry into the route table, but it will add this automatically. Now, if you are using other services other than S3 or DynamoDB, it is always recommended to go with the interface endpoint. Here we have use case. It is ideal for a service that require more granular control over the network traffic such as SS, EC2, SSM or other AWS service that supports private link. Here we have one problem that we have to pay cost. There are charges for data processing and hourly usage for the internet interface endpoint. Setup is quite simple, requires setting up and managing ENI elastic network interface within your VPC. You do not need to add any internet route table entry. Let's say that if I am going to choose interface, if you look at this, I just need to choose a security group and all this. We do not need to add any entry into the route table. So it is simple process, but look at the problem. Here you have to pay charges. And AWS always giving us recommendation that if you want to use S3 and DynamoDB, go with the gateway endpoint. Here I have one final summarization, like choose a right endpoint for S3. If you are going to create endpoint for your S3, the best idea is to go with the gateway endpoint. For accessing Amazon S3 from your VPC, the gateway endpoint is generally the recommended and simpler choice. It's specifically designed for S3 and integrates seamlessly with your VPC route table, ensuring efficient and secure access to S3 without additional cost. So right now, as we are doing this particular practical endpoint for S3, we have to go with the gateway endpoint. This is the end of chapter number 2. Now this is chapter number 3, create gateway endpoint for S3. See, there are many type of practicals available in AWS. We are always looking to explain you with simplicity. Here I am going to explain you gateway endpoint practically and with really very simplified way. Once you will perform this lab, you will definitely understand that how these things are working. And you will also amazed that how simple to understand this particular process as well. So let's start Gateway Endpoint Practical. Sorry, I know that you want to watch full video, but full video is now not available on YouTube. If you want to watch full video, I want you to go to our website. When you will go to our website, you will find out our course 100 Days YouTube Challenge. I want you to enroll for this course by paying only 499 rupees for lifetime if you are from India. If you are from outside of India, you just need to pay $7 US. Once you will enroll to this course, you are going to get all full videos over there on our portal. You are also going to get certificate after completing the course, and we have just uploaded 120 videos. We are going to upload another 120 videos as well. So there will be total 240 videos. I hope we are going to meet inside the class. Thank you very much.